Breaking tonight, fallout from dramatic testimony in Ottawa and Washington.
Engagements from his office to mine on SNC had to stop. They did not stop.
The former Attorney General on the Prime Minister, SNC-Lavalin, and allegations of veiled threats.
I am calling on Mr. Trudeau to do the right thing and to resign.
At issue on the growing political scandal.
He is a racist, he is a con man, and he is a cheat.
Michael Cohen takes on his former boss.
But I am no longer your fixer, Mr. Trump.
From hush payments to Trump's business, our U.S. political insiders break down the risks for the president. This is The National.
It has been a day of explosive testimony on both sides of the border with serious implications for Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump. Tonight we'll have special coverage on both stories beginning in Ottawa, where after weeks of silence, Jody Wilson-Raybould told MPs and Canadians her side of the SNC-Lavalin affair.
This pressure or political interference to intervene was not appropriate.
Here's what we learned today. The former Attorney General says 11 people pressured her for 4 months to intervene in the criminal case against the engineering giant SNC-Lavalin, including staff in the PMO, the clerk of the Privy Council, and the Prime Minister himself. She says the pressure was not just about jobs, but also the 2018 Quebec provincial election. And she believes she was shuffled from her own job for resisting that pressure. The Prime Minister sees it differently.
I therefore completely disagree with the former Attorney General's characterization of events.
Tonight we're digging into this complex political story. We'll break down Jody Wilson-Raybould's testimony and how the opposition is reacting, including a call for Justin Trudeau to resign, and a special edition of At Issue to sort through what all this means for the government. Let's start with the former Attorney General's explosive allegations. She spent 3 hours and 35 minutes describing in detail how she says she stood up against her colleagues and her boss. David Cochran takes us through her tell-all in front of the Justice Committee.
She said she wanted to speak her truth, and what a story she told.
I experienced a consistent and sustained effort by many people within the government to seek to politically interfere in the exercise of prosecutorial discretion.
It started in September. She says the first person to cross the line was the Prime Minister.
At that point, the Prime Minister jumped in, stressing that there is an election in Quebec and that, quote, I am an MP in Quebec, the member for Papineau.
It was the September 17th meeting the Prime Minister has referenced before. Trudeau says he used it to reassure Wilson-Raybould that she would make the final call on SNC-Lavalin. She views it differently.
I was quite taken aback. My response, and I vividly remember this as well, was to ask the Prime Minister a direct question while looking him in the eye. I asked, quote, are you politically interfering with my role, my decision as the Attorney General? I would strongly advise against it, end quote. The Prime Minister said, no, 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 we just need to find a solution.
The hunt for a solution continued long after she stood her ground. A series of 10 meetings, 10 phone calls, plus texts and emails she says were too much. The Finance Minister worried about job losses. Advisors in the Prime Minister's office who repeatedly urged her to seek outside legal advice in the hope she would change her mind.
In my view, the communications and efforts to change my mind on this matter should have stopped. Various officials also urged me to take partisan political considerations into account, which it was clearly improper for me to do so.
By December 5th, she was fed up. She met with the Prime Minister's top advisor, Jerry Butts.
I wanted to speak about a number of things, including bringing up SNC and the barrage of people hounding me and my staff. He said I needed to find a solution.
From there, she says it escalated. On December 18th, her Chief of Staff, Jessica Prince, met with Jerry Butts and the Prime Minister's chief, Katie Telford, a meeting her chief detailed in text messages.
Jerry said, quote, Jess, there is no solution here that does not involve some interference, end quote. Katie was like, quote, we don't want to debate legalities anymore, end quote. They keep being like, We aren't lawyers, but there has to be some solution here.
The very next day, Wilson-Raybould got a call from Michael Wernick, Canada's top civil servant. Wernick told her the Prime Minister was determined to get SNC-Lavalin a deferred prosecution agreement.
He said, quote, "I think he is going to find a way to get it done, one way or another." So he is in that kind of mood, and I wanted you to be aware of it.
In his testimony last week, Wernick says nothing crossed the line.
So I can tell you with complete assurance that my view of those conversations is that they were within the boundaries of what's lawful and appropriate.
Clearly, their lines are different.
Within these conversations, there were expressed statements regarding the necessity of interference in the SNC-Lavalin matter, the potential of consequences, and veiled threats.
After her conversation with the clerk, Wilson-Raybould didn't hear from anyone in the Prime Minister's office until January 7th. That's when she was told there would be a cabinet shuffle, and she was being moved.
I will not go into details of this call or subsequent communications about the shuffle, but I will say that I stated I believe the reason was because of the SNC matter. They denied this to be the case.
So, David, this testimony was detailed. I'm sure some would consider it damaging, but there were things that she didn't say.
Yeah, that's right, Ian. She testified for nearly, 4 hours, and she says she still has things to say. The issue is that cabinet confidentiality still applies to her time as Veterans Affairs Minister and since she quit cabinet, so she can't tell us about her 3 conversations with the Prime Minister in Vancouver before she quit cabinet. She won't tell us the reason she quit, and she won't tell us the details of the presentation she gave cabinet a week ago. But what she told the committee today was that she feels she has relevant information to share from those events that would be helpful for all of us in trying to understand this story, and that she would be happy to come back and testify again if she can get the permission she's looking for. So all in all, Ian, not a good day for the government, especially when you say, oh, wait, there's probably more. But if there is one semi-positive thing you can take from this for the government, is that Wilson-Raybould says nobody broke the law here. She was asked multiple times if she thought a crime had been committed through the application of this pressure. She said no, it was not illegal, it was simply improper, and after all, she was the Attorney General when this happened.
There is that. David Cochran in Ottawa. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Wilson-Raybould says she doesn't believe any laws were violated. The opposition, though, not so sure. And tonight, those allegations of political interference have prompted calls for the Prime Minister himself to step down. Salima Shivji now on the debate over what happens next.
Justin Trudeau simply cannot continue to govern this country now that Canadians know what he has done. And that is why I am calling on Mr. Trudeau to do the right thing and to resign.
The opposition didn't skip a beat, convinced there's enough here for the RCMP to investigate and more.
What we need to do is get to the truth, and that's what a public inquiry will do.
Those calls followed meticulously detailed allegations laid out by Jody Wilson-Raybould.
An attempt to politically interfere with my discretion as the Attorney General of Canada. It was inappropriate.
Which prompted a role reversal in this room, applauded by those who are usually on the other side of the aisle.
I need you to know that I believe you entirely. I need you to know that. And I want you to know as well that I very much admire your courage in being here and telling Canadians what you have experienced.
The opposition MPs were supportive and encouraging, ready to tease out and amplify every pressure point they know could hurt the Prime Minister.
Do you believe that they are speaking with the full authority of the Prime Minister in their discussions with you?
Yes.
All the while, Wilson-Raybould's own Liberal colleagues were on the attack.
Did you not consider resigning then?
I did not consider resigning then. I was, in my opinion, doing my job.
Did you not have an obligation to raise these concerns with the Prime Minister, to call him or write him?
I did raise the inappropriateness of the conversations.
Do you still have confidence in the Prime Minister today?
I'm not sure how that question is relevant.
Relevant, though, for the Prime Minister. Busy tonight thanking this crowd of volunteers who helped his party win this week's by-election in Outremont, in vote-rich Quebec, also home to SNC-Lavalin.
I strongly maintain, as I have from the beginning, that I and my staff always acted appropriately and professionally, and therefore I completely disagree with the characterization of the former Attorney General about these events.
Testimony that will give the opposition fodder for weeks, but one which certainly made members of her own caucus very uncomfortable.
I was elected as a Liberal member of Parliament, and that hasn't changed.
With Wilson-Raybould's continued assertion, she's a Liberal first and foremost. But the Prime Minister has the final say.
I haven't yet had the opportunity to review her entire testimony. I will do that before making any further decisions.
As the fallout continues. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Ottawa.
So where does this leave the government tonight? We gathered the At Issue gang for a special Wednesday night edition. Chantal Lebert is in Montreal, Andrew Cohen in Toronto, and Althea Raj is in Ottawa tonight. So all of us were sitting there, whether in person, as you were, Althea, or the rest of us watching on television, didn't move for more than 3.5 hours. And Chantal, let me begin with you. What was the headline from what you saw today?
Terrible day for the government, probably worse even if they were bracing for a bad day. And what I found most striking about the detailed testimony of the former Attorney General is how she took pains to place the Prime Minister at the center of the action.
Andrew?
It was credible. This wasn't just he said, she said. This is backed by contemporaneous notes, verbatim text messages, and it was much more than just an individual minister or official giving her an ambiguous remark. This appeared to be much of the senior stratus of the government, not just involving jobs, but explicitly on partisan basis. I cannot think how it could be more damning. And the Prime Minister's response that, well, I just disagree, is really not much of a response at this point. This is an absolutely extraordinary attack on the government, and they have yet to come up with a serious response. And
Althea, the headline for you?
Well, it was obviously a very bad day for the government. But there's a couple of unanswered questions that her testimony brought forward, and I think that there are certain things that have become very, very clear. Number one, the government has no idea how to handle Jody Wilson-Raybould, and this has turned into a weird game of chicken.
So a lot of people, I'm sure, wondering what the political impact of this testimony might be, and no one knows for sure. It's only been a matter of a few hours, and I guess it plays differently in different parts of the country. So Chantal, on this, I'd also like to start with you. What's your prediction of what the impact will be?
Oh, I think the government today saw any chance that this is going to go away before the next election fade into the distance. Yes, there are differences of opinion on whether the government should have intervened to get SNC-Lavalin off the hook of a criminal trial. But the issue today is different, and it is sustained pressure on the Attorney General to do something once a decision is taken. So that frame will not help Mr. Trudeau anywhere in the country. He's got to hope, if he throws himself at the mercy of voters, that they will decide that it still makes him someone that they can re-elect as Prime Minister.
You know, Andrew, on the one hand, I wonder if maybe this is, could this be only a couple more days of bad headlines? On the other hand, this story keeps on surprising us. It has for the last 10 days or so. What's your sense of that?
My sense is that we need to hear a whole bunch of people testify under oath about this, from chiefs of staff to cabinet ministers to certainly a lot of the people in the Prime Minister's office. So unless we hear from them, this certainly isn't going away from it. And I absolutely agree that the Prime Minister is at the center of this. Look, there was a culture revealed here, if you believe the former Attorney General's testimony, a culture that the whole rule of law in this respect was basically an obstacle to be got around, not something to be respected. And likewise, that her position as the Attorney General should be treated in the same way. That culture appears, certainly the Prime Minister seems to be involved in it, and the culture is set by the guy at the top. So there are a lot of questions still to be answered.
I know there were partisan comments being made by the members of the Justice Committee, Althea, but I think it was Charlie Angus who said this wasn't a show of politics in that hearing. It was a show of integrity by Wilson-Raybould. And I wonder what your reaction was to how, I was going to say how she performed, but maybe that word is too trite, what her testimony was like today.
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. The whole issue is about credibility. Now, who has more credibility, the Prime Minister or Jody Wilson-Raybould? And this speaks to, a lot of people voted for Justin Trudeau because they thought that he was going to do politics differently. And the story that Jody Wilson-Raybould told today, the pains she took to illustrate it, suggests that Justin Trudeau's government is just like any other government, that has had the pleasure to serve Canadians, in the sense that they make decisions for partisan reasons, and that's what she suggested was very improper.
So we sit there and we watch 3.5 hours, a little bit more than 3.5 hours of powerful testimony. But I assume a lot of Canadians don't have that luxury. So they may see 1 or 2 clips from Wilson-Raybould on the news, or a couple of quotes in the paper. And then they'll see the Prime Minister, who spoke tonight and seemed so calm and so confident. And Chantal, do you think in that kind of balance of one clip against another, it may not be as damaging?
What hurts Mr. Trudeau on this and makes his strategy probably not to the level that he needs is the fact that she is one of his own. This is friendly fire, and for that reason, I don't think I've ever seen, Andrew and Althea can correct me if they remember anything like this, but I rarely seen someone who is still in caucus, a former minister, turn around and do as much damage to the credibility of the Prime Minister as she has. So people will look at Jody Wilson-Raybould, they will say, well, this is a Liberal, this isn't a partisan attack on her part, and it's going to be harder for the Prime Minister to win this case. You've seen the polls. At this point, few people were already inclined to believe that Justin Trudeau had done no wrong. I don't think those numbers are going to flip his way after this.
I know this is subjective, but it struck me that Wilson-Raybould was thoughtful, she was measured, and sometimes her pauses spoke louder than her words. Let's listen to another excerpt from the testimony.
Do you have confidence in the Prime Minister today?
I'll say this. I resigned from cabinet because I did not have confidence to sit around the table, the cabinet table. That's why I resigned.
My question wouldn't be why you did resign. My question would be, why didn't you resign before?
Why do you think she was hesitant to... I mean, she wants to remain a member of the Liberal caucus, but on the other hand, she didn't seem to be quick to articulate her confidence in the Prime Minister.
Yeah, and with respect, I'm not sure that's the question we really... I mean, there was a lot of questions to the Prime Minister today of, how will you punish her? The question that needs to be answered here is, do we have a government that respects the rule of law? There have been serious accusations made now by the former Minister of Justice and Attorney General in that government. Accusations backed up, as I say, by contemporaneous notes and other evidence that we've yet to see anything to the contrary from the other side of this question. I think that is the question that should be on everyone's minds here is, why the defense now has to be she's basically making this all up, that she's lying through her teeth. I don't see any reason why she would be. I think there's more reason to suspect that the people rebutting her are, and I think we really need to get to the bottom of this.
But how would they prove that they are telling the truth and that she's not?
Well,
I get your
I'd like
point.
to see them start offering some evidence.
I suspect that they will stonewall now.
But, Andrew, I think you make a really good point. Althea, I'll go to you on this. Like, we talk about political implications. This is a political story. And as, Wilson-Raybould herself says, she doesn't think anything illegal happened. But as you suggest, Andrew, this speaks to kind of one of the fundamental principles of how an Attorney General ought to be able to do her job or his job, which is to be free of political interference. So, Althea, speak to that kind of core issue for a moment.
Well, I think it's possible that both sides are correct. I mean, they both think that what they've and how they acted was appropriate. She did not provide any indication about why she felt a DPA was inappropriate or who she consulted to come up to that conclusion, but she obviously felt very strongly that she had communicated to the government that she did not want to do this. She talked about being hounded by the government for months, even veiled threats from the clerk of the Privy Council. The government, from its side, and in Jody Wilson-Raybould's telling of the story, did not obviously think that her decision was final and was trying to find ways to allow her, or let her come to their side to intervene. Because at the end of the day, she's the one who is responsible publicly for intervening in this case. She didn't want to, so they were trying to find a way to give her cover. Oh, you could get a legal opinion. Oh, we're going to get some stakeholders to write friendly op-eds saying that what you're doing is correct. It's possible that both telling of the stories are accurate. It's just, where is the line drawn? I'm not a lawyer. I don't think this is illegal, what the government did, but is it appropriate? It doesn't seem so.
If there was one conversation with one official about the problems with jobs, then we'd have maybe a gray area. When you've got so many people for so long, in defiance of her repeated objections that my decision is final, explicitly invoking, as she tells it, partisan considerations, we're way, way over the line.
And Wilson-Raybould says it's not just the repeated references to jobs, it's also the fact that the Quebec election, the provincial election, and, you know, political considerations as well. We have literally, Chantal, 30 seconds, so last word to you.
Okay. I don't think the Quebec election was a factor. If you look at the timeline, the vote was on October 1st, but I think the upcoming federal election, if SNC-Lavalin were to move out to London or wherever, would have profound consequences for the Liberals and Justin Trudeau in Quebec.
All right. Well, thanks to all three of you. I know you're busy, and we appreciate your analysis tonight. And At Issue, we'll be back tomorrow for our regular Thursday panel. And we do want to hear from you. So send us your questions on SNC-Lavalin. Tweet us at CBC The National, or send us a message on Facebook.
We are, of course, following other stories tonight, including the measles outbreak in BC. How can health officials convince parents to vaccinate?
And we'll look at rising tensions and retaliation after a plane is shot down over Kashmir.
But up next, the other big political story.
The President of the United States thus wrote a personal check for the payment of hush money.
The testimony that gripped Washington.
He asked me to pay off an adult film star.
From the president's former fixer explosive allegations.
Mr. Trump knew in advance about the WikiLeaks drop of emails.
What it all means for Donald Trump.
Lying for Mr. Trump was normalized, and no one around him questioned it.
We go in depth next on The National.
Since taking office, he has become the worst version of himself.
Well, that dim view of the president's character persisted throughout Michael Cohen's testimony before Congress today, all while he was subjected to repeated attacks on his own character. Donald Trump's former attorney testified for hours before the House Oversight Committee, making many serious allegations against the president, some of them familiar, not all of them backed up by evidence. Here's what we learned today.
First of all, I want to say thank you all for being here today.
Cohen accused the president of potentially criminal behavior. He presented checks signed by both Donald Trump Jr. and the president himself while in office, reimbursing Cohen for an alleged hush payment to Stormy Daniels. Cohen also testified that Trump knew ahead of time about the leaked Democratic emails released by WikiLeaks during the campaign, and he suggested federal prosecutors have launched another investigation of the president, not yet made public. Tonight, our Keith Bogue will examine Cohen's credibility and the Republican strategy to defend the president, while our U.S. political insiders will look at where this leaves the White House. But first, let's go deeper into the testimony itself. It wasn't just what Cohen said, it was how he said it. Called by some Trump's fixer, by the courts a fraudster, and by Trump himself a rat. Cohen painted an intimate portrait of the U.S. president for those willing to believe it. Paul Hunter takes us inside the committee room to pour through his testimony.
I am ashamed of my weakness and my misplaced loyalty, of the things I did for Mr. Trump in an effort to protect and promote him.
Michael Cohen with a stunning and blunt assessment of his former boss, Donald Trump.
He is a racist, he is a con man, and he is a cheat.
Under oath on Capitol Hill, Trump's former personal lawyer and keeper of secrets let loose on effectively everything.
Donald Trump is a man who ran for office to make his brand great, not to make our country great. He had no desire or intention to lead this nation, only to market himself and to build his wealth and power.
Cohen, who will soon be jailed for lying to Congress at an earlier hearing and lying about other crimes, says he regrets that. But today he underlined, indeed, he did lie for Trump, as directed by Trump, often. About hush money for Stormy Daniels, about Trump's business dealings in Moscow, about Trump's finances broadly. On Trump's character,
You have heard him call poorer countries shitholes. In private, he is even worse. He once asked me if I could name a country run by a black person that wasn't a shithole. This was when Barack Obama was president of the United States.
Ugliness aside, some of Cohen's allegations may mean legal trouble for Trump, suggesting there's been bank fraud, insurance fraud, and campaign finance violations. What's more,
is there any other wrongdoing or illegal act that you are aware of regarding Donald Trump that we haven't yet discussed today?
Yes. And again,
but, said Cohen, he can't talk about that just yet. Then there's the big question. Does he know whether the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to try to fix the 2016 election?
I do not. And I want to be clear. But I have my suspicions.
But the dots, he said, do seem to lead in that direction. And he told lawmakers Trump got a heads up on the release of those stolen Democratic emails that summer that so damaged the Clinton campaign.
Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect, wouldn't that be great?
Republicans, with props aimed at making their point, were having none of it.
You're a pathological liar. You don't know truth from falsehood.
Sir, I'm sorry. Are you referring to me or the president?
Hey, this is my time.
Are you referring to me, sir, or the president?
When I ask you a question, I'll ask for an answer.
Sure.
As for Trump, defiance from Vietnam, tweeting, Cohen's lying in order to reduce his prison time. But Cohen's not nearly done talking. Tomorrow, he meets with lawmakers privately. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
So Keith Bogue has more for us from Washington and where all this leads. Keith, last night we talked about how Cohen is a convicted felon. He's an admitted liar. Given the credibility issues, how do you do?
Well, I think he helped his case in two ways. One, he didn't try to understate his own failings. He was straightforward about the crimes he committed. He acknowledged his credibility problem and tried to mitigate it with documentary evidence to support what he said wherever he could. But he also didn't try to overstate any of the things he was saying about the president. And several times he resisted attempts to get him to say more than he knew or more than he believed. So he came across as committed to being strictly factual.
But the Republicans on the committee, did they just have no success in undermining him?
Well, they attacked Cohen's credibility over and over again by bringing up his record and pointing out that he's a liar. But the problem is, they didn't tell us anything we didn't already know. All that stuff was baked in. In fact, Republicans might inadvertently have hurt their own cause because the overriding impression they gave is that they really don't want to get to the bottom of this story. They asked very few questions about the crimes Cohen implicated the president in, and frequently they complained that Cohen shouldn't even have been called to testify. At one point, Cohen suggested to them that their denial of what they were dealing with was an early stage of exactly what he'd been through with Trump, and he said he now felt like a fool because of his moral blindness.
And out of this, what happens now?
Well, the testimony given today to the committee gives them new avenues of investigation to explore in future, and it sounds like they're going to do that. That probably means they're going to want to hear from people such as the Trump Organization's chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg. His name came up often. And maybe some family members, including Donald Trump Jr., and you can imagine how the president's going to like that. What they might have to be careful of, though, is building a case for impeachment before they fully considered that that's where they want to end up.
Okay. Keith Bogue, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Our political insiders also closely followed Cohen's testimony. How could they not? Here's their take on the key moments of an extraordinary day in Washington.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Brown James, Democratic strategist.
Hi, I'm Jay Shabrea, Republican strategist.
Mr. Trump put Mr. Stone on the speakerphone. Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange, and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days, there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect, wouldn't that be great?
This was a real pivotal moment in the testimony today because two things. One, it shows that President Trump has a pattern of not telling the truth. When he gave his interview to the New York Times, where he said that he had no knowledge about the WikiLeaks, that shows that he is not telling the truth, according to Cohen. And then number two, Roger Stone is currently awaiting trial now. And so this has just far-reaching implications, and I think it really was a cornerstone of Cohen's testimony today.
There's no doubt that that is going to be a PR nightmare for the Trump administration. But the question is going to be, was there collusion? Does it rise to that level? And what you're going to find out in the coming days, in the coming weeks, is with Adam Schiff's investigation, with the Mueller investigation, if they'll answer that question.
How long did you work in the White House?
I never worked in the White House.
That's the point, isn't it, Mr. Cohen?
No, sir.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not, sir.
You wanted to work in the White House.
No, sir.
You didn't get brought to the dance.
Sir.
And now?
I was extremely proud to be personal attorney to the President of the United States of America. I did not want to go to the White House.
One of the highlights of the testimony today was when Jim Jordan pressed Michael Cohen about his desire to have a White House job, and Michael Cohen said no. Now, it was widely reported at the time that Michael Cohen desperately wanted Donald Trump's approval, desperately wanted to be in the White House, and for me, I don't quite understand why he wouldn't just deflect and say, yeah, I wanted one, but you know, it didn't happen, but my testimony is still accurate. However, he continued to persist on this, and this is going to be a theme that you're going to see from Republicans throughout all of these testimonies. Define the witnesses.
Yes, I think it's important to ask the question of what Cohen's motivation is giving this testimony. But look, this man has already said that his life has been turned upside down. He is preparing to go to prison. I'm sure at this point, which is what he said actually, is that he wants to have a time to tell his truth, to, I'm sure, save face with his children, with his family members, and be able to stand up for what's right and be able to tell the American people what he knows to be fact about President Trump.
All I wanted to say is I just find it interesting, sir, that between yourself and your colleagues, that not one question so far since I'm here has been asked about President Trump. That's actually why I thought I was coming today. Not to confess the mistakes that I've made. I've already done that.
You really have to wonder, why does it seem like, or why is it that the Republicans are choosing to protect President Trump and not wanting to get clarity on so many issues and problems that seem to be surrounding this president? Why are they trying to protect him? What are they trying to hide?
What the Republicans displayed today was tremendous message discipline. Define Michael Cohen for who he is, someone that has already lied to Congress and can't be credible. This is a den of thieves. It's very easy to do with all these witnesses because they're all flawed witnesses. And I think Democrats even acknowledge that today.
When was the last communication with President Trump or someone acting on his behalf?
I don't have the specific date, but it was a while ago.
And what did he or his agent communicate to you?
Unfortunately, this topic is actually something that's being investigated right now by the Southern District of New York, and I've been asked by them not to discuss and not to talk about these issues.
The most important parts of today's testimony were the things that Michael Cohen didn't say when he was talking about other investigations and other criminal acts by Donald Trump. Now, there was not a lot of news broken today, just people confirming what they had already thought on both sides. But that part right there, that's going to be the nightmare for the Trump administration in terms of what is Robert Mueller looking at and what is he going to come out with in his findings.
The fact that there may be more criminal activity that is uncovered through this investigation, I think is really jarring for President Trump. After today's testimony by Cohen, a lot of people are going to have questions about his validity, about the things that he said. But here's the thing to remember. This man worked in one of the closest capacity anyone could work for a person for 10 years. He was his personal attorney for 10 years. And so there is a lot of information that he knows that he's privy to where he should be taken seriously.
Look, I think the real losers today continue to be the American people, because this is not the way things should be in Washington, but they've been too long, and it's kind of degenerated into this. And there's truly grandstanding on both sides. Republicans will say that Democrats are wasting taxpayers' time, and Democrats are saying that Republicans aren't trying to find the truth. This is just a really, really sad day for America, and it continues to be.
By the way, U.S. President Donald Trump is keeping an eye on Cohen's testimony from Vietnam. He's now entering a second day of meetings with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Right now, it's just after 11:30 in the morning in Hanoi, and there is a full day of talks planned. The two leaders are expected to discuss the denuclearization of North Korea, building on their first meeting in Singapore last year. A signing ceremony is scheduled for later in the day, but it's not known what, if anything, the two leaders will agree to. We'll keep an eye on the summit throughout the evening here on The National. Next on The National, health officials call it vaccine hesitancy. They say it's a global threat, so why are they having trouble getting the message out?
It's surprising that it's 2019 and we're now looking at a virus that had all been eradicated.
Disturbing and dangerous. That's how officials are describing these billboards in Toronto, suggesting vaccines are harmful. They were displayed across the city, paid for by an advocacy group called Vaccine Choice Canada. The company that owns the billboards has now taken them down, but health officials worry about the impact they could leave on parents.
These ads that are posted contain half-truths, and so they leave a seed of doubt in parents wondering, well, what is actually the message that's trying to be conveyed? Vaccines have scientifically been proven to be effective, and they're safe.
The measles outbreak in British Columbia has reignited concern about parents not vaccinating their children. 2 new cases were confirmed today, and that brings the total to 15. The World Health Organization says that vaccine hesitancy is a big threat to people around the world. And as Vicadopia explains, it's a threat fueled by an information war that seems to be escalating.
Is that Maximus the cat? When I received that phone call, it was really scary. You know, my son was a high-risk baby as well.
Little Max was exposed to the measles in a BC hospital just days before he was supposed to be immunized. It meant he spent his first birthday isolated from his young cousins. Happy birthday, dear Max. Max's exposure to the measles virus happened because of another parent's unfounded fears of the link between autism and vaccines.
We were very angry, disappointed. You know, it's surprising that it's 2019 and we're now looking at, you know, a virus that had all been eradicated.
The science about the safety and efficacy of the MMR vaccine has long been settled, but the public debate has only escalated worldwide and online, and so have the measles outbreaks. Last year, measles in Europe hit a 20-year high. Canada and the U.S. are not far behind. And as this Ontario doctor found out, even discussing mandatory immunization can spin out of control.
Last year, a colleague and I were threatened quite seriously by somebody in the public who was furious about us even mentioning the word mandatory, to the extent that the police had to get involved.
Social media platforms are fertile ground for sowing the seeds of doubt about immunization. Just type the word vaccine in Facebook. Both Pinterest and YouTube are now trying to restrict anti-vax content. Canada's top doctor admits it's a struggle to counter social media's mixed messages.
We did not have a good idea of the power that they have, both for spreading good information and misinformation, and we're all trying to catch up to this.
Despite what vaccine-hesitant parents are reading on social media, this Winnipeg pediatrician manages to change some minds by listening.
You want to keep people engaged. I think the thing is you don't want to make them feel badly about it, and I'm sure half or more will eventually start to immunize, even the hardcore vaccine-resistant group.
As for little Max, he finally got his shot, giving his mom peace of mind. Vicadopia, CBC News, Toronto.
Still ahead on The National, our moment, what it's like witnessing history up close. Our reporters uncovering explosive testimony on both sides of the border.
I've been here since 2001, and I've never seen a cabinet minister resign and then open up on how government decisions are made.
I raised how I needed everybody to stop talking to me about SNC, as I had made up my mind and the engagements were inappropriate.
It's something I'll never forget.
We are live here on The National, and here are a couple of stories we're watching. The federal government is set to introduce legislation to pardon anyone convicted of possessing pot before the drug was legalized. Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale tweeted the bill would provide expedited pardons at no cost for simple possession of cannabis. The change would affect about 500,000 Canadians. In Cairo, at least 20 people are dead, more than a dozen injured after a train smashed into a concrete platform and burst into flames in a station. Many of the victims too badly burned to be identified. The driver allegedly stepped off the train to speak to another driver and didn't pull the handbrake, and that caused the locomotive to speed off. It is the worst rail accident in the country in 18 months. Egypt's transport minister has resigned over the incident.
Now, tensions are rising tonight between two nuclear powers. India and Pakistan appear to be squaring off, trading escalating acts of aggression, and that has much of the world watching, understandably, with grave concern. Pakistan has shot down two warplanes belonging to India. Both fell in the disputed Kashmir territory, one on the Indian side, the other in an area claimed by Pakistan. Since becoming independent in 1947, these two nations have gone to war 3 times. And as Thomas Degla tells us, they're now trying to avoid making it a 4th.
Setting fire to an explosive struggle. In Karachi, Pakistan, they celebrated their country facing down India and inching closer to war in the process. This is what torqued up tensions today. Indian aircraft apparently shot down by Pakistani forces in Pakistani territory. The Indian pilot was taken into custody. His photo then released like a trophy on display.
It is demonstration of our capability, capacity, and will.
In Kashmir, the depth of the conflict is matched only by the size of the mountains. India and Pakistan both lay claim to the region, and each state controls part of it. Tensions between neighbors again sparked up 2 weeks ago when Pakistani militants blew up a car bomb, killing 40 Indian troops. India retaliated with airstrikes of its own.
India does not wish to see further escalation of the situation.
Both sides are avoiding nasty rhetoric, fearing a misstep could cause catastrophe, considering these rivals are loaded with nuclear weapons.
The level of tensions are very high, but the propensity to escalate quickly is equally dramatic.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan addressed his nation, inviting his Indian counterpart to talks. Problem is, India accuses Pakistan of harboring terrorists. Suffice to say, de-escalating this crisis might not be so easy.
It is in the interest of terror groups to ensure that there is conflict between the two countries. At the top leadership levels, neither wants war or conflict.
For now, security is ramped up and anxiety is growing. In a region that has suffered far too much violence, history could be repeating itself. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, London.
This dispute has become a problem for air travel, especially for those flying on Air Canada. That's because it's among the carriers that has partially suspended service to India after Pakistan closed its airspace.
Exhausted completely, whole messed up.
I was grateful that they were considering the safety of everybody before anything else.
I'm really tired now.
A flight to New Delhi left Toronto's Pearson Airport at 9:30 last night. It was halfway to India when it was forced to turn around. After 14 hours in the air, passengers were right back where they started. Anyone traveling to the region is being told to check the airline's website as well as travel advisories. Next on The National, we take you behind the scenes of today's big political stories.
in our moment.
We all knew that Michael Cohen was going to slam Donald Trump today.
Donald Trump is a man who ran for office to make his brand great, not to make our country great.
It just says so much about where this country's at right now.
Today was just one of those days with two big stories, two key testimonies unfolding literally at the same time on both sides of the border. So for our moment tonight, we decided to take a bit of a step back, ask some of our colleagues in Ottawa and Washington just what today was like. Their moment is our moment.
We have been watching Jody Wilson-Raybould's testimony for hours. When she started talking, it was kaboom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the Justice Committee for providing me the opportunity for extended testimony today.
I've been here since 2001, and I've never seen a cabinet minister resign and then open up on how government decisions are made.
There was a sustained effort, an attempt to politically interfere with my discretion.
I know what Mr. Trump is.
I guess we all knew that Michael Cohen was going to slam Donald Trump today, but when he said those words...
He is a racist, he is a con man, and he is a cheat.
I mean, my hair stood on end. It freaked me out. But who says that about a sitting president? Well, today, Michael Cohen said that about Donald Trump.
It was instructive, and it's something I'll never forget.
I have never seen anything like this before.
It just says so much about where this country's at right now.
And both of these events today say so much about the countries in which they happen. I mean, we know, we were talking about this earlier, there are political science students out there right now who are going to be parsing the language, the look, the feel of these days, the impact of them, and basically creating a commentary about Canada and the U.S.
And you know, Adrian, a lot of our desks in the newsroom here in Vancouver and in Toronto, people have two television screens. We could see them side by side. The composition of the committees, the people asking the questions, younger, more diverse in Canada, more polite, kind of speaks to maybe the difference, you know, on each side of the border. That is The National for Wednesday, February the 27th.
Good night.
Good night.